All right, so before we get into today's new lesson, using the MA method to factor, we're going to do a quick refresher. So the quick refresher, factor using the greatest common factor. So we just finished that up on the opener, so you guys should have this fresh in your mind. So factor using the greatest common factor. What do these two terms here represent of my area model? What do those two terms, 18C and 24, represent on my area model? Yeah, the area. So I'm going to go ahead and put those in. Now, I have the area, but I do not have the length or the height. So that's what I'm going to find. So in order to find that, I'm going to have to find the greatest common factor of these two terms. What are the factors of 18?
1 and 2.
Okay, and then for 9? Okay, then my factors of 24. You guys with me today?
Oh, yeah.
What two numbers can I multiply together to get 24?
You guys got this.
Ben, you can participate too. Jenna?
Oh, okay.
6 and 4.
So 4 and 6. What about for 4?
2 and 2.
And then for 6?
3 and 2.
Okay, what do I do with this information I have now, Riley? What do I do with this information?
Find the like of it or something.
Say what?
Find the like terms.
Not the like terms, but what they have in common, correct?
Yeah.
So I put my prime numbers in a list, and I find what they have in common. So what do they have in common, Riley?
2 and 3.
So they have a 2 in common, and they have a 3 in common. When you multiply those together, what do you get?
6.
So the greatest common factor is 6. Do they have a variable in common as well?
C. No.
Do they both have the C, though?
No.
No. So what does the greatest common factor represent on my area model?
6.
What does it represent on my area model?
Height.
The height. So what am I trying to find here? The length. So if you guys remember, we always do our height first, then our length. So 6 times what equals 18C?
3C.
3C. So I'm going to label my model accordingly. Then 6 times what equals 24?
4.
And now I'm ready to write my final answer. So 18C plus 24, when we factor that out using our area model, it equals what? Times.
3C plus 4.
Perfect. How do you guys feel about that part? Do you feel pretty confident?
Yes.
Because you're going to have to be able to use this skill in today's lesson. Okay? Do we all have this one down? Okay, let's briefly, quickly. Oh, hold on. Sorry, Riley. If you want, go ahead and start working on finding the greatest common factor for 15C squared and 20C. We good, Riley?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Logan. What are my factors of 15?
3 and 5.
Okay, and they're both prime, so I'm going to circle them. What about for 20?
2 times 3 times 5. Oh, 2 times 10 times 5.
Okay, and then we're going to stack them and find out what they have in common here. So what does 15 and 20 have as their greatest common factor?
3 and 5.
They have a 5 in common. So the greatest common factor is 5. Now, do they have a variable in common?
Yeah.
What do they both have?
The C.
We're going to use the C, the one with the smallest. So the greatest common factor now represents what on my area model?
The height.
The height. It's always going to represent your height, okay? What else do I know about this area model?
We have the area
Which is?
equals 5C squared,
How about 15C squared?
15C squared, and equals 20C.
Okay. Missing information is what?
The length.
The length. So I have my height, so I'm going to go ahead and put that 5c in on both of my rectangles, and I'm going to find my missing length. So 5c times what gets me to 15c squared? 3c, that's correct. And then 5c times what equals 20c? 4. And now I've basically factored 15c squared plus 20c to equal. So what does it equal?
Equals 5c parentheses.
So times, yeah.
3c plus 4 and parentheses.
Perfect. Now, the quiz that you guys took on that last week, you guys all did a really nice job on it. So I feel pretty confident that you're going to be okay. Now, the bottom one, the bottom refresher, is really going to get us into what we're going to focus on today. Okay? So you have 2 heights and 2 lengths, right? Now, how did I know that these were referring to heights and lengths? How did I know that this was height and length and not total area? Yeah, they have the parenthesis. So what's the height of my area rectangle, or my area model here?
3a,
And then,
4,
okay. Logan, what's the length of my area model here?
2A and 5.
So what am I looking to find? What am I looking to find for this area model? I have the height and the length, but what don't I have?
Talking to me.
Anybody? The answer, which represents the what of the area model? Yeah, the area. So how do I find the area of this rectangle, Maddie?
3A times 2A.
And that equals?
6A to the second power.
Very good. Go ahead and do the next one too for me.
The number 5 one.
Mm-hmm.
3A times 5. Which equals 15A.
So what I absolutely love here is that Maddie's always doing the height first, then the length. That's going to be important for today's lesson. Okay, find the area of each rectangle on the bottom for me, Danny.
4 times 2A is 8A.
Okay.
And 4 times 5 is 1.
Okay. Almost done. Next step.
Combine.
Combine what?
8A or 15A.
Okay, because those are your like terms. And then write my final answer. So my answer is going to be
23A would be to the second power.
6/8. Would say that again?
23A.
Oh, wait. Always, what do you write first? Your one with the highest exponent. What's your highest exponent?
6a squared.
6a squared. Then what?
Oops.
Plus. Now, your question here. Would it be 23a squared? No. Remember, when you combine like terms, when you're adding, the variables and the exponents stay the same. So 23a. Then what?
Plus 1.
Okay. So you guys, basically, you did the area model backwards this time. So what I'm going to give you today is I'm going to give you this area. When I give you this area, you guys are going to have to factor it. So when you go to factor it, because of the way that it's set, you're going to have 2 heights. Okay, so that's where the difference is going to come in today. That's why we're going to have to be able to use the MA method. All right, so let's flip it over. Let's get into our good notes. Let's get into the notes that we are going to learn today. Now, so, like I said, I am giving you this time the total area. What I'm not giving you is any information about the height or the length. So when we're talking about the total area, what total area does this term represent? Which area does this term represent in our area model? The 10e squared.
It represents the top left.
Yeah, so that usually goes in the top left here, right? This second term, 23e, that's usually split between this and this, right? It's usually the combined like terms of my top right and bottom left. Well, I can't just split that 23e however I want. I can't just say, I'm going to put 13 up here and 10 down here. Doesn't work like that. My numbers won't work out even like that. So I'm going to have to leave those areas blank for right now. Then my last term here, this 6, what area does that last term represent?
The bottom right.
The bottom right, yeah. Okay, so I'm missing a lot of information. I'm going to have to come up with some information. Now to start solving my area model, what did we learn last week? We had to find the what? In order to start solving my area model last week, I had to find the height, right? Which was my greatest common factor. This week, to start solving my area model, you're going to have to find the M, the A, and then what the MA is of your expression here. So, to find your M, I'm going to come over to my far left of my notes. You guys, if you write big like I do, make sure that you're writing small. That way you can fit everything in. So I'm going to come up right over to my far left, and I'm going to find my M. So to find my M with these terms, I'm going to take my first coefficient times my third coefficient. Now, what does coefficient mean? What does coefficient mean? If I'm taking my first coefficient and my third coefficient, what am I taking?
Exponent.
No, coefficient. Back to very first month of school.
Either the number in front of it or is it
So it's the number in front of the variable or the number by itself. So the coefficient, the first coefficient is 10. What's my third coefficient?
23.
What's my third coefficient?
Oh, 6.
6. And when I multiply those together, what do I get?
60.
Okay. Now, I found my M. Now I have to determine what my A is. What do you guys think my A might be?
10.
I've used my first coefficient already. I've used my third coefficient. So my A is just going to be that 23. Here comes the new skill. The new skill that you guys learned yesterday. Now, what can you multiply together to get your M? So what can you multiply together to get your 60? Then add together to get your 23. So we had to find our factor pairs. So if we do 1 and 60, that's too many. Okay, what about 2 times 30? Well, if I multiply them together, that'll get me 60, but if I add them together, that'll get me 32. Too many. So my next factor pair of 60 is what? 3 times what will get me to 60?
Oh, 3 times what? It would 80 to 20.
20. Now, 3 times 20 equals 60. If I add these two terms together, will I get 23? If I take 3 plus 20, will I get 23 for my A?
Yep.
So this is what I'm going to use. Now, what do you think, if you had to take a guess, what would I do with that number 3 and 20?
It could be the height.
No, that's a good guess. So my height is always going to be a greatest common factor. Yes, it's going to be my area. Now, does it matter where I put each area? No. I could put the 3 here and the 20 there, or I could put my 20 here and my 3 here. It doesn't matter. Why would you? I would rather do it your way too. Can you tell me why?
Because it's the smallest number. Smallest number goes first, and I feel like the first 2 boxes are the first ones.
So you'd rather put the 3 here?
No, it's 3 on the bottom.
3 on the bottom?
Yeah. And
Okay.
then 20 on the
That works. Now, if you would happen to flip your answers, if you would happen to flip how you put those areas in there, it would be fine. Your answer would be the same. It would just, your height and length would be flipped. Now, what does your 3 and your 20, if you look, what variable should be with it? What variable should be with the 3 and the 20? An E. Okay, so now we're getting there. So now I finally know, took a lot of work, but I finally know the total area of my entire model. What don't I know yet, though?
Height and length.
The height and length. So I'm going to have to find the height. Now, when we found the height last week, we did it by using the greatest common factor, right?
Yep.
What I'm going to do, you guys, is I'm going to find the greatest common factor of this top row. So what are my 2 terms for my top row?
5.
What is the what are the terms for my top row? 10e squared and what else? What's my other term for my top row? 20. 20e. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to find the greatest common factor of these 2 terms. So what 2 numbers can I multiply together to get 10?
2 and 5.
Okay. And what about for 20?
This is like
2 and
a lot
10.
of work.
2 and it is a lot of work. We're finally putting everything together that we learned. This right here is the biggest lesson you'll learn this unit. The next 2 lessons that you guys will learn is much easier. Okay? Okay. So basically you've taken every step that you've learned from the moment we started Unit 8 and you're putting them all together right here. Okay, so now we have 10 and 20. So we have 2 times 5 and 2 times 2 times 5. So what numbers do they share? What numbers do they have in common? What numbers do they have in common up here, you guys? 2 and 5. If you multiply those together, what does that equal? 10. And then they have a variable. Do they both have an e in common? Yes.
Would it just be E or E?
It would just be e because you use the smallest one. So our greatest common factor is 10e. Now, the greatest common factor of 10e is for my top row, right? So what's the greatest common factor? What's the height for my top row? 10e. Okay, so we're not going to worry about that yet. We're going to solve our top row. So if I have the height and the total area for my top row, I can find my length now, right?
Yep.
So I'm going to go ahead and my height only for my top row is 10e. So my height for the top row is 10e. So now I'm ready to find the length for the top row. So I'm not worried about this bottom row yet. You guys know how to do this part. So 10e times what equals 10e squared? E. So E or 1e. So that's my length for the top. Okay? Then I look, 10e times what equals 20e? 2. All right. But I'm not done, am I? I just have my top. I have to find my bottom. But because I found some information for my top, I now have more information about my bottom. What do I know about my bottom area models now? What do I know about my bottom rectangles? Do I know the height? No, I don't. But what do I know about them? I know the total area, and I also know what now? And what's this right here? The length, right?
Got it.
Yeah, look at the length. What's the length for the bottom rectangle? It's the same as the top, right? So what's the area, or excuse me, what's the length for the bottom rectangle? And we always put the 1e, the length goes second, right? What's the length of my bottom right rectangle? 2. So now I'm ready to find what missing information?
It wouldn't be 2.
The height. Yeah, so that's 2.
I thought you were trying to figure out the first
So
one.
now we're trying to find the height, right? So what times 1e equals 3e? 3. Now does 3 times 2 equal 6?
Yep.
Then we know that our height is in fact what?
10e.
What's our height? 3.
10e plus 3.
And now we're ready to fill in our answers. So this first block represents our height. So what goes here?
10e plus 3.
10e plus 3. And we know the second group of numbers represents my length. So what goes as my length?
20 or e plus 2.
And that's your lesson, you guys. Is it a lot of work?
Yeah.
Yeah. But you guys know how to do each step. So now it's just combining all the steps together in a process that makes sense for us. Okay? Do you all have this down? You want to have good notes. Okay. We're going to come back to example 2. What I want you to do now is go ahead and write this down. Write detailed notes. So these notes are going to go on the right-hand side of your note sheet. So number 1, don't just put determine the M and the A. I have taught this lesson for 7 years. And I always have students that put the M and A determinant, and then when they get to the quiz, like, how do we determine the M? It tells you right here. First coefficient times third coefficient.
So
Well, where's my A? It's the second coefficient. So write this. This is number 1 that you write down. This is number 2 you write down. Number 3, 4, and 5. Those steps are so important. So don't abbreviate or any of that. Make sure you have nice, detailed steps that's going to help you through this next lesson.